Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. And we have news of a new poll, which will make again uncomfortable reading for Humza Yousaf. But then, doesn't every poll these days make rather uncomfortable reading for Humza Yousaf and all of them in the SNP? Goes to show that really none of them have got a safe seat anymore. We'll look at the poll, we'll look at the numbers, but there is something as well which I find is very telling, which we will look at when we come to see the table. Again, not something I think that will surprise too many people, but one I think is kind of indicative of one of the problems that the way that Holyrood is made up is slightly biased, so we say, towards extremism. But we'll see this. It's a big loss again. It's heartening reading for Labour, but strangely, it's very good news for the Tories, who are going to do appallingly badly in England, but exceptionally well in Scotland. Let's have a look. So, new poll hammer blow for Humza Yousaf as voters desert scandal-ridden SNP in their droves. And this is now. I mean, it's going to get worse. The more things go on, the more that comes out, the more people wake up and see the awfulness, the worse it's going to get for them. It's great news, isn't it? And of course, the greatest news of all is that Humza Yousaf is still leader. Imagine if they did get rid of him, they put someone in that was acceptable, then it would change everything. And I think a lot of the backbenchers of the SNP are seeing this now. And I don't know how much longer Humza Yousaf has got. I don't suspect it's long. Anyway, a major new election prediction suggests the Nats are on course to return just 20 MPs, with Labour on 22 seats north of the border, as Sir Keir Starmer romps to a landslide. And that's a landslide, massive landslide across the whole of the UK, but still a good win in Scotland, up from 2 to 22, and over halving the SNP vote is quite an achievement. The Tories are enjoying some consolation as well, with 11 Scottish MPs, which is way up from where they are at the moment as well. Seems everybody's winning, except, of course, the SNP. So anyway, this isn't going to be a surprise. As I said in the header there, it's not going to really be surprising to anyone, is it? But a new election prediction has forecast misery for the SNP, with Keir Starmer romping to a landslide victory. Now, when I see misery for the SNP, I'm always pleased, as indeed are most of you. We do have a few SNP voters who hate watch the channel. And to you, I'll say, well, commiserations, but, you shouldn't be surprised. Look at what the SNP are doing and then wonder why they're going to fail. Perhaps if you woke up and smelled the cherries, you'd think, do you know what? As I look around me, it is a bit shit, isn't it? And that's 17 years of SNP rule. You can't blame Westminster for everything. Anyway, Humza Yousaf, with voters, will also be misery-ridden, with voters returning just 20 Nat MPs. This would be well short of the majority of seats he claims would give him a mandate to begin talks on Scottish independence. And indeed, he wouldn't even have the most seats, let alone the majority of seats. And that was the thing he was after, if we got the most seats. Not going to happen. And this is done without the benefit of tactical voting. And if the good burghers of Scotland were to sit there and accept that certain things could happen, and maybe who's second here? Well, look, let's drop that one out. Let's do that one out, and do this, and say, okay, I'm a Tory, but Labour could take this seat if they had a little bit more help. Help them. And Tory and Labour voters, if you're in a seat where it's probably going to be the SNP, but if you could help the Tories, help the Tories. You're not voting for the Tories, you're voting against the SNP, and ultimately everybody wins to some degree or another. Anyway, while the new poll from Stonehaven predicts bad news for Rishi Sunak at a UK level, with the Tories set to tumble out of power after 13 years, there is better news for Douglas Ross, north of the border, with the party set to finish up with 11 Scottish MPs. That's a lot more than they got now, which I think is 5, is it, or 6? So I think 6 at the moment, isn't it? It comes as speculation grows about an early vote, with Downing Street putting an election footing from January the 1st. Now, it all depends on interest rates, on the growth of the economy, on there's a lot of factors. It's still likely October, but there's an increasing thought that it's going to be end of April, early May. But it all, as I say, it all depends on getting the interest rates down at the banks, more money going in, people feeling slightly better, the optimism rises. I think the Tories know they're not going to win the election regardless. What they're looking at is cutting the losses. The prediction uses a technique known as MRP, multi-level regression and post-stratification. Sounds very complex, but it actually isn't. It's just basically looking at current polling and then making weighted allowances on previous polling and things like that. It's usually just the last set of polls, and it's a poll of poll with different weightings as to age. Anyway, it correctly forecast the result of both the 2017 general election, including the shock upsetting individual seats, and the 2016 US presidential election. Under this model, Labour would end up with 402 MPs and a whopping majority of 154. The way it's going, it could be more. With the Conservatives on 151 and Lib Dems on 54 and the SNP on 20, putting the SNP the fourth biggest party, and therefore they'd have to move across one and let the Lib Dems sit where the SNP currently sit. That will annoy them, and that also is a good thing. North of the border, though, Labour would have 22 MPs and the Lib Dems would have 4, and then with the 11 that we mentioned from the Tories. That's enough, of course. There is enough there. There could be a supply issue, a supply agreement where the Tories agree to give Labour the shot at government, where the Tories will vote with them on certain issues, for example, or demand, a couple of seats here, a couple of ministries there, and a few, what's the word I'm looking for? A few policies pushed through, and in return they'll make Anna Samar the First Minister. It's not impossible. Anyway, publishing the new MRP analysis, Stonehaven said Labour's position in England, where it is expected to return 353 seats, is buoyed further by the erosion of support for the SNP in Scotland, who would return only 20 MPs to Westminster at the moment. It's the worst general election result since 2010. Now, as I say, tactical voting. Let's make it less than 20. Let's make it a lot less. Let's make it none. 8 years ago, this recovery was unimaginable. The SNP had swept nearly all of Scotland's Westminster seats, and Labour returned 1 Scottish MP. Yet, both the model and the Rutherglen and Hamilton West by-elections swing to Labour confirm the worsening fate of the SNP, which has been on a downward trend, and any momentum behind a second independence referendum halted. When true results, we did the video the other day about the true questioning on whether Scotland should be independent or not, and it was about 2/3 to 1/3. If you take yes, no out of it, it's 2/3, 1/3. Is that the Tory seats? The Scots Tories were buoyed by the results, which would see them increase their tally of MPs from 6 to 11, with victory in a number of key battlegrounds with the Nats. And they're predicted to win, and there's the list of seats. I won't go through them. You can read them. I'll put it on the screen, and you can let it sit there for a second. You can always pause and read. All tends to be out in the middle of nowhere. Nowhere really sort of in the centre of the big cities, is it? Is that a surprise? Not really. Anyway, a Scottish Conservative spokesman said the poll is further evidence of voters deserting the feuding, scandal-ridden, independence-obsessed SNP in their droves. And it highlights that in swathes of seats across Scotland, voters recognise that only we can beat the SNP and switch the focus from the Constitution onto the public's real priorities, such as the economy and NHS waiting times. Some of the big names tipped to lose out on SNP frontbencher are SNP frontbencher Anam Kazir in Airdrie, and Airdrie Shots, who has enjoyed the support of her party leader after working with him as an aide, and outspoken party outcast Angus MacNeil, with the Western Isles also tipped to return to Labour. Now, that will be very bad news for Anam Kazir, considering the I'm going to be careful how I put this, the alleged and theorised identity as to the person who was handing out envelopes filled with notes to encourage people to select a certain character for a certain seat at a certain time. You can draw your own conclusions. I'm not saying it because, got to cover myself. But that'd be an awful lot of money that I think would have been wasted. But of course, she's only in because of who she is, not because of who she is, if you understand what I'm saying. It was an obvious fix. They actually got rid of someone who was already lined up for the seat to make sure she got in. Because, what's his view on it? Too many white people? That's basically how it was. So, he's got to do this uplift to make himself feel better. All very political. Anyway, here is the prediction of all the seats. Again, I'm not going to go through all these. It takes too long. What I'll do is I'll throw them up there. You've got a bit of time there if you want to pause and have a look at that. It's very important that you do. Just look down the list. So, SNP, Tory, Labour, SNP, and so forth. That's up to Caithness. Then we'll bring the Caithness up. And we'll go from Central Ayrshire. Again, Tory, Labour, Tory, whatever. A couple of SNPs in there and so forth. All the way down to... where's that? Down to Edinburgh South West, and there, and then we'll go Falkirk down to Lothian. Again, the same old things, and then the last bunch are just about there, Mid Dunbartonshire to West Dunbartonshire, and that's the end of it. Now, as you've had time to look at all them, and you obviously can pause the video and look, there's one thing that becomes amazingly clear, and that is that at no constituency level at all will a seat be won by the Greens. And I think this is one of the weaknesses you have with the Scottish system. People elect constituency MPs. And it goes to show that in Scotland, no one wants to send back a Green member of Parliament. And that's the will of the people. But when you get to the Holyrood, you have the same thing with the constituency seats like that. But then you also have a list system. And that list system allows people who generate enough votes across the entire country to go on their list and go in, and they go, right, you're entitled to X number of seats. The problem there is you get extremists in, and such Marxist extremists such as the Greens. And that in itself wouldn't be too bad, only they then get invited to become members of the government. And we can see how appallingly awful that has become. And it is why, of course, the likes of Fergus Ewing are calling for the end of the Bute House Agreement, which is a story I'll probably do tomorrow morning. But he's certainly right. Anyway, I shall round this one off here. It's been going on long enough. But it is another blow, another poll blow for Humza Yousaf. And we have to wonder how long it will be before he is no longer the leader of the party. I can't see it being long. Anyway, let's round off, come up, and we'll finish the video. Not a day goes past when Humza Yousaf must open the papers, look at what the news is and say, oh God, was it worth it? Why am I doing this? The strain, the struggle. If it isn't the polls, it's the people he's working with, or it's his own stupidity coming back to bite him. The man can't get a break, couldn't he? He just can't get a break. And no one deserves it worse. I mean, let's face it, he brings it on himself for being stupid and ignorant and single-minded. And when they are gone, what's he going to do? Nobody would ever employ him. Now, of course, he's all right. He's going to sit back on his huge pension, never work again, paid for by the people he's helped to destroy, which somehow seems a bit weird. If only there was some way of removing the pension from them. Some kind of criminality, perhaps. If you're found guilty, you lose your pension. That would suit him. You can see him in about 20 years' time, sitting there, working in a public toilet, shoveling shit and pushing it around with a broom. And even then, he really wouldn't be qualified for that. He'd have got the job as a lucky break. Anyway, I shall finish there. Thank you very much for watching. That's probably my last video of the night, unless anything major happens, in which case I'll do a flash video or something. So go and enjoy your good evening. I'm going now to prepare my dog's party. Yes, really. And so if you want to see the pictures, I'll put the pictures up. If you don't know, my Facebook page is Silver Fox. On Facebook. What else would it be? So go along there, do press there, become a chum, as it were, like on that and join. And I'll post some pictures up later on there. I'm not going to put it on here. This is personal stuff, but it'll go on there. So do come along and see. And I'll show a picture of Barnsley, that's my dog, and his chums, and see if we can get the pictures. Or you know what it's like. We've got party hats for dogs. Yeah, it's like getting them on isn't the problem. Getting the picture of the 4 dogs wearing the hats, that's gonna be the magic. Anyway, hopefully we see that. Until we do, have a great evening. I will speak to you soon. Goodbye.